Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today for this absolutely incredible story. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now because we've got stories that you won't want to miss. Now, let's get back into the story. Imagine standing across from the man you hate, the man whose world stole your fiancé, Elias. Imagine believing that this man, this arrogant king, Roman D'Angelo, was the source of all your suffering. And then imagine, at the moment you finally have him in chains, you discover the terrifying truth, that Roman wasn't the killer. He was the most devastating victim of all. This is a story about a single punch that ignited a mafia war. It's a story about a secret that broke 2 lives. But most heartbreakingly, it's the story of the agonizing moment Lena had to look at her supposed enemy and realize they were just 2 lost souls, bound together by the monstrous lies of a father who ruled through cruelty and manufactured guilt. It's a story where hate had to die so that love and justice could finally breathe. They say the worst fights don't start in a dark alley at midnight. They start right out in the open, usually when one person has forgotten that they're not the only powerful force in the room. That's exactly where we find Roman D'Angelo. Roman was one of those men who didn't just walk into a room, he arrived. He was tall, built like a brick wall, and wore a bespoke suit that probably cost more than some people's first cars. If you looked closely, his face was handsome, the kind of sharp, striking features you see on old movie stars, but his eyes, well, those eyes were all business, cold, and calculating. He carried himself with a silence that wasn't quiet but heavy. It told everyone around him that he knew exactly how much damage he could do, and he was always ready to deliver. Right now, Roman was sitting at a massive corner booth in a trendy, bustling Italian spot near Toronto's entertainment district. It was the kind of restaurant that kept the lights low and the music just loud enough so that every table felt like its own little private kingdom. On the other side of the booth was Lena. Lena wasn't the kind of person you noticed first. She was the one you noticed last, the one who, when the rest of the noise died down, you realized was the calm center of the storm. She was serving tables tonight, gliding between the tight gaps, carrying heavy trays with a grace that was almost balletic. She had a simple ponytail that kept her dark hair neat, and her uniform apron was spotless. But if you actually looked at her, and Roman certainly started to, you'd see something deeper. Her hands, though quick and efficient, looked a little scarred and rough, like they'd seen more hard work than most. Her eyes, a beautiful hazel color, were always watching, always taking everything in. They were beautiful, but they had a quiet sort of sadness to them, a haunted quality that suggested she'd spent most of her life looking over her shoulder. She seemed like a girl who just wanted to fade into the background and get through her shift. Unfortunately for Lena, fading into the background was the last thing Roman D'Angelo would allow tonight. Roman had a couple of his serious-looking men with him, guys who stared straight ahead and only spoke in short, clipped sentences. He'd just finished a long phone call, a conversation filled with low, menacing tones that made the waiter who dropped off their wine cringe and move faster. Roman was feeling good. He was feeling dominant. And when Roman felt dominant, he needed a stage to prove it. Lena came over to clear the appetizer plates. She was focused, moving quickly to clean the mess of bread crumbs and olive oil. "Excuse me, miss," Roman's voice cut through the background hum. It wasn't loud, but it had that demanding quality that made you stop immediately. Lena froze, turning slowly. "Yes, sir? Can I get you anything else?" Roman leaned back slightly, giving her a slow, dismissive look from her worn sneakers to her tired eyes. He didn't reach for his wallet or the menu. He just rested his elbow on the rich velvet of the booth and let the silence stretch. "I need you to tell me something, sweet girl," he finally drawled, his lips curving into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Did they run out of competent people in this place, or is it just you tonight?" The air around them seemed to drop a few degrees. The waitress at the next station paused her work. This wasn't a complaint about the food, this was something else. This was a performance of power. Roman wasn't insulting Lena, he was insulting the whole room, using her as the unfortunate medium. Lena didn't flinch, but her eyes narrowed, and the beautiful hazel color seemed to turn to cool flint. "Sir, I apologize if the service wasn't up to standard," Lena said, her voice low and even, showing an almost superhuman control. "I'd be happy to get the manager." "Manager?" "No, no," Roman interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand, laughing a shallow, cold sound. "See, you don't get it, do you? I don't want the manager. I want you to explain to me how you manage to walk around carrying a tray but still look like you're trying to hide in a ditch. You know, you really should smile more. It's unprofessional to look so miserable." The insult was designed to sting, to push her out of her quiet composure. Roman enjoyed seeing people squirm. He expected her to blush, stammer an apology, maybe even tear up a little before hurrying away. That's what women usually did. That's what people usually did. But Lena did none of those things. Her back straightened, and she placed the appetizer plate down so deliberately that it made a soft, ominous thunk. The haunted look in her eyes intensified, replaced by a flicker of cold, absolute rage. "You're right," Lena said, her voice now barely a whisper, forcing Roman to lean forward slightly to hear her. "It is unprofessional to look miserable. But it's even more unprofessional to act like a loud bully just to make yourself feel big in a public place, Mr. D'Angelo." She used his name, casually, like she was naming the brand of water bottle on the table. The use of his full name, delivered with such calm certainty, hit Roman like a small physical shock. Very few people outside his inner circle dared to use his name so directly. Roman's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened, and the atmosphere at the booth went from tense to genuinely dangerous. One of his guards shifted, his hand instinctively moving inside his jacket. "Oh, you know who I am," Roman said, his voice dropping into that familiar, deadly gear. "That's smart. Maybe you should listen to what you know. You just insulted me, waitress. And you did it in front of all these fine people. Do you have any idea the mistake you just made?" Lena didn't even look at the crowd. She kept her gaze locked on Roman's face. It was in that moment, in the intensity of that confrontation, that the familiar sadness returned to her eyes, twisting now with a fresh wave of recognition and something that looked like desperate finality. It was like she hadn't just recognized a bully, but the bully, someone who had already ruined her life once. "I know exactly the mistake I made," Lena replied, her voice now carrying the weight of years of suppressed pain and anger. "The mistake was thinking I could ever truly hide from people like you." Then, everything moved in a blur. In a fight, it's always the speed of the first move that matters most. Roman was still posturing, still calculating the best way to humiliate her, maybe demanding her job, or worse. But Lena wasn't interested in a long, drawn-out battle of words. She was interested in ending the threat. As Roman started to push himself up from the seat, ready to loom over her, Lena's right hand moved like a whip. It was a short, brutally efficient movement, not a sloppy, wide-swinging punch, but a sudden, controlled impact right on the point of his jaw. It was the kind of punch delivered with precision and the full, coiled strength of someone who had trained, not just someone who was angry. The sound it made was horrifying, a sharp, sickening crack that cut through the music and the chatter of the crowded restaurant. Roman D'Angelo, the arrogant mafia boss, the man who demanded respect and fear everywhere he went, didn't even have time to register the pain. His eyes rolled back, his large body went completely slack, and he pitched backward out of the expensive velvet booth, crashing down onto the pristine marble floor with the echoing sound of a statue falling. Silence descended, so thick you could almost taste it. Across the room, phones were already out. Every person who had watched the confrontation, who had felt Roman's oppressive, aggressive presence, was now filming the unbelievable sight, a man who carried so much weight and power, lying completely still, knocked out cold by a petite waitress. A few seconds later, the distinctive sound of a video alert pinging confirmed it was already being uploaded somewhere. Lena didn't move. She didn't check on him or run away. She just stood there, her chest heaving slightly, her right fist clenched, staring down at the still form of Roman D'Angelo. The rage was gone, replaced once more by that deep, terrifying recognition. It wasn't just, "I won this fight." It was, "You were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to be gone forever." As the crowd erupted in shocked whispers, Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She looked down at his unconscious face and whispered a single word, a name that carried the echo of old heartbreak and new danger. Roman. The game was over. Her quiet life was gone. And this was just the beginning. When Lena finally moved, it wasn't to run, but to breathe. That deep, shaky breath was the first sign she was back in the room, back in the chaos she had just created. The room was no longer just a busy Toronto restaurant, it was a scene of mass confusion. People were pointing, talking loudly into their phones, and mostly, they were staring at the two immovable things, the large, unconscious body of Roman D'Angelo, and Lena, standing over him, looking less like a victorious fighter and more like someone who had just woken up from a nightmare. Her coworkers finally snapped out of their shock. Two of the restaurant's kitchen staff, huge guys who looked like they mostly handled heavy boxes, rushed over to check on Roman, though mostly they just stood awkwardly around him, unsure if touching him was a good idea. Lena knew she had maybe 30 seconds before the police arrived, or worse, before Roman's serious-looking bodyguards remembered they had a job to do. But the bodyguards were already moving. They weren't running for their boss, they were running for her. "Grab her," one of the men barked, his voice tight with controlled fury. This was the critical moment. Most people, having just pulled off a miracle punch, would freeze up. But Lena didn't freeze. When the guard lunged, she sidestepped him with a shocking quickness, her movements fluid and economical. She ducked under his heavy arm, pivoting so fast her ponytail whipped her cheek. She didn't fight back against the guards, she just used her training to evade, weaving through the crowded tables like smoke. She was out the back door and into the humid night air of the service alley before the guards even cleared the first row of tables. Now, Lena was running. She ran past overflowing dumpsters and stacks of empty crates, her apron flapping behind her. Her mind was racing, but it wasn't panicked. It was focused on escape, on dissolving back into the safe anonymity of the city she'd spent 5 years building around herself. She finally reached a side street, blending in with the late-night foot traffic. She pulled off her apron, crumpling it into a ball and stuffing it into a nearby public garbage can. She was still in her uniform shirt, but without the apron, she looked like any other exhausted person leaving a late shift downtown. As she walked, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold dread. She'd broken the first rule of survival: do not draw attention to yourself. And she hadn't just drawn attention, she'd punched a spotlight right onto her life, shining it directly onto the man she knew she needed to avoid at all costs. She pulled her phone out, her thumb hovering over the few, tightly managed contacts she kept. She had to warn someone. But as she looked down, she saw her screen was flashing. She had over 30 new notifications, not from texts or calls, but from social media alerts and news headlines. She tapped one of the links. It opened to a frantic, shaky video, clearly filmed right after the punch. It showed Roman on the floor, and then, the camera zoomed in tight on her face. The comments section was already a torrent of noise. Most people were cheering the punch. "Best right hook I've ever seen. She must be a pro. That suit needed knocking down a peg." But then, she saw the posts that made her blood turn to ice. They weren't comments about the waitress. They were comments about her past. "Wait a minute, is that the ghost? No way. The ghost vanished 5 years ago. This can't be her. The speed, the footwork, the perfect chin shot, that's no amateur. It's gotta be her. She's back." The ghost. That was the name they had given her in the brutal, forgotten world of the underground fights. It was the name she had worked desperately to bury, along with the trauma and the guilt of that time. She had earned the name because she was impossible to hit, moving like she wasn't quite solid, appearing and disappearing inside the ring until her opponent was too confused to fight back. She kept scrolling, heart pounding against her ribs. She saw names of fight promoters she hadn't thought about in half a decade, names associated with money, danger, and debts she thought were long paid off. They were tagging each other, sending out rewards for information, already treating her unexpected re-emergence as the biggest news in their dark corner of the world. They thought she was back in the game, ready for the big money fight they always promised her. Lena realized the punch wasn't just physical, it was an electronic grenade thrown into her meticulously constructed quiet life. She walked for another hour, not toward her tiny, safe apartment in Scarborough, but toward a quiet, 24-hour coffee shop in a different borough, a place where the lights were bright and nobody knew her name. She ordered a coffee she couldn't afford and sat in a secluded booth, trying to think, how could they recognize her? She looked different now. She wore no makeup. She'd put on a little weight, enough to make her softer, less like the coiled wire she was back then. But the muscle memory of the punch, the way she had dodged the guard, it was the signature of the ghost. She had to change her phone, her address, her entire identity, and she had to do it tonight. Now, we know that when things get tough, sometimes the best thing you can do is reach out for support. You're watching this story unfold, and maybe you know someone who needs a little distraction or a good story to lift their spirits. Take a second right now to share this video with one friend who you think needs a heartwarming reminder that justice always wins. As she scrolled through the news alerts, trying to find anything about Roman, wondering if he was awake, how badly he was hurt, and how angry he would be, her phone buzzed with a message notification. It wasn't a text, but a direct, encrypted message through a secure app she hadn't touched since she left the fight circuit. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. This felt different. This wasn't a promoter trying to find her for a paycheck. This felt personal. It felt like a warning. Finally, she tapped it open. The message was short. It had no sender name, only a string of numbers. We know who you are. Stop hiding. He knows too. And he won't forget the ring. We're waiting. Lena's hand started to tremble, the cheap ceramic mug rattling softly against the table. He won't forget the ring. This wasn't just about the ghost. This was about Roman D'Angelo. Her secret, the reason she had vanished from the fighting world, was deeply, painfully connected to him. She pushed her phone away, leaning back against the hard vinyl of the booth, closing her eyes. The haunted look was back, clearer than ever. She wasn't just scared for her safety, she was terrified of the past she had just resurrected. Years ago, she hadn't just walked away from the underground fights. She had walked away from something terrible that happened because of those fights, something that Roman D'Angelo was deeply tied into. She had run to save her life and, more importantly, to save her soul. Now, by punching him, she hadn't defeated him. She had triggered a chain reaction, pulling two dangerous worlds, her fight past and Roman's dark present, into a violent collision course. She opened her eyes and looked around the brightly lit coffee shop. The scent of burnt coffee and sugar was suddenly oppressive. She was surrounded by regular people, students studying, shift workers taking breaks, all living their normal, quiet lives. She had shattered her own ability to be one of them. A small smile, tired and sad, touched her lips. She had done the one thing she promised herself she'd never do, she had fought back, and in doing so, she had found herself again, the ghost, standing ready, even if that meant facing the demons she had buried. She was no longer just a tired waitress. She was a fighter. And now, she finally had a purpose, even if that purpose was terrifying. She picked up her phone, deleted the secured message, and pulled up a map. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't go home. She was on the run, and for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't running from fear, she was running into the fight. Roman D'Angelo woke up not to the gentle beeping of an alarm clock or the quiet hum of his high-rise apartment, but to a searing, blinding pain that ran from his jawbone straight up into his skull. He woke up to the realization that he was weak, he was exposed, and worst of all, he was humiliated. He found himself in a luxurious but sterile environment, a private suite at a high-end clinic, the kind of place where money bought you silence and discretion. He was lying in a bed that felt too soft, with the smell of antiseptic hanging in the air. A doctor, looking pale and nervous, was checking the bandages around Roman's jaw. "You're lucky, Mr. D'Angelo," the doctor muttered, his eyes darting everywhere but Roman's face. "It's a clean break, hairline fracture. Nothing surgery can't fix, but you'll be on soft foods for a few weeks." Roman didn't hear the medical assessment. All he heard was soft foods. He, the head of an organization that commanded the loyalty and fear of thousands, the man who ate only the best cuts of meat and drank the most expensive spirits, was going to be drinking soup like a baby because of a waitress. He didn't move. He didn't shout. That was the most terrifying thing about Roman when he was truly angry. He just lay there, perfectly still, his eyes locked on the ceiling, the anger radiating off him like heat from a furnace. The doctor finished up and practically ran out of the room. A moment later, the door opened quietly, and two men entered. These were Roman's closest advisors, Nico, who was quiet, meticulous, and always dressed like he was heading to a funeral, and Marco, loud, aggressive, and currently looking like he was ready to smash something. Marco wasted no time. "Roman, you gotta see this. The video, it's everywhere. It's on every site in the UK, Canada, and the States. They're calling her the knockout waitress. One clip alone has over 20 million views." He held up his phone, showing Roman the viral clip. It was grainy, shaky, and instantly recognizable, Roman leaning back with that superior smirk, followed by the blinding speed of Lena's punch, and then the sickening thud as he hit the ground. The comments were brutal. They weren't just mocking him, they were mocking his power, his dominance, and his image. Roman finally sat up, ignoring the fresh spike of pain. He took the phone from Marco, not to watch the video, but to look at the comments, to gauge the true scale of the damage. "They're saying you lost control," Nico said gravely, leaning against the wall. "They're saying you've gone soft. The younger crews, the ones who always wanted to test your strength, they're laughing. We've already had 2 shipments delayed tonight because people are testing the waters." In their world, perception was everything. Roman D'Angelo's power wasn't just in his guns or his money, it was in the idea that he was untouchable. And Lena had touched him. She hadn't just touched him, she had turned him into a meme. "This girl," Roman said, his voice a low, rough growl, his undamaged jaw working as he spoke. "She's not just a waitress. That punch, it wasn't street fighting. It was disciplined. Military grade, maybe." Marco scoffed. "Who cares what it was, Roman? She's a civilian. A nobody. You have to take her out. Now. Before the sun sets again. We find her, we make an example of her, and we upload that video. We show them what happens to people who disrespect the family." Nico nodded, agreeing with the brutal logic. "Marco is right, Roman. We eliminate the problem quickly. We restore the balance. We turn her body into a lesson." Roman gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The immediate, rational part of his brain agreed. The job was simple: find the girl, kill her, and regain control. That's what a king would do after being humiliated in the public square. But as he looked at the still frame of the video, zoomed in on Lena's face in the moment right after the punch landed, he saw something that stopped the killing impulse cold. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was recognition. And something else. Something older. Something that felt like deep, cutting sorrow, as if she hadn't just knocked out a stranger, but had finally delivered justice to someone who deserved it. That look bothered Roman intensely. It hinted at a connection he couldn't place, a history he couldn't recall. Where have I seen those eyes before? They weren't the eyes of a random, angry waitress. They were the eyes of a ghost. And Roman D'Angelo hated ghosts. "No," Roman finally spat out, his voice hoarse from the effort. "No killing. Not yet." Marco looked stunned. Are you serious? You're going to let this slide? They're going to think we're weak. I said no killing, Roman repeated, leaning forward and meeting Marco's gaze with icy finality. This isn't about reputation yet. This is about information. That girl knows me. And I hate not knowing who knows me. He handed the phone back to Marco. I want to know where she learned to fight like that. I want to know who trained her. And most importantly, I want to know why she looked at me like that, like I was a bad debt she was finally collecting. Nico, the calmer of the two, understood. Roman wasn't backing down, he was shifting the game. For Roman, revenge wasn't just physical, it was intellectual. A private manhunt, then, Nico confirmed. No official channels. No cameras. No mess. We use our people, the quiet ones. Exactly, Roman said, settling back into the pillows, his face a mask of controlled fury. I want boots on the ground at that restaurant, talking to the kitchen staff, the busboys, everyone. Find her name, find her address, find her past. He then added a crucial instruction, the one that showed the depth of his shame and fear. And I want that video scrubbed from every corner of the internet. Pay whatever you have to pay. Anyone who re-uploads it, their hands get broken. Anyone. I don't care if it's a politician or a kid in Jamaica uploading a reaction video. This never happened. We all have moments where we are exposed and feel completely stripped bare. It's in those moments that we find out who we truly are, and Roman D'Angelo was finding out that even his endless power didn't protect him from the past. But Roman was a meticulous man. He knew that the only way to bury a king's humiliation was to turn the enemy's victory into the enemy's doom. Lena had shown him her strength, and now, he would use his resources to uncover her vulnerability. Bring her to me, Nico, Roman commanded, his voice cold and hard, a decision made. I don't want her dead. I want her in this room. Unharmed. I want to look into those eyes and find out exactly what part of my past she represents. Go. Nico and Marco left, leaving Roman alone in the quiet, clinical suite. He reached up and gently touched his throbbing jaw. The pain was unbearable, but it was nothing compared to the pain of having his dominance publicly questioned. He closed his eyes, his mind replaying the punch, the fall, and that look in Lena's eyes. He didn't know it yet, but he hadn't just ordered a manhunt for a waitress. He had opened a door to a history both he and Lena thought they had left sealed years ago, a history that involved underground fights, a desperate choice, and a love that had been violently broken. His order for her to remain unharmed wasn't mercy, it was the first tremor of a realization that this girl might be something far more dangerous, and far more valuable, than just a casual enemy. This whole situation is proof that sometimes, the biggest obstacles we face are the ones we created ourselves a long time ago. Think about that for a second. Hit that like button if you agree that your past always catches up to you, and subscribe if you want to see what happens when it finally does. Roman D'Angelo, the humiliated king, was hunting for a ghost, and he had no idea that the ghost was actually hunting him, too. He thought he was taking back control, but he was simply walking straight back into a trap built years ago by regret and love. The private manhunt began with the kind of ruthless efficiency that only unlimited money and absolute control could buy. While Roman D'Angelo was recuperating in his private clinic, his men, led by Nico, were moving like shadows across Toronto. They started where the insult occurred, the restaurant. They didn't interview the hosts or the managers, those people lied. They went straight to the staff who worked the longest, dirtiest hours, the dishwashers, the prep cooks, the busboys. They offered cash, not threats, because cash bought information faster and cleaner than fear ever could. It took less than 12 hours. A young man who cleared tables late at night recognized the picture and gave up the one thing Lena had carefully protected, her working name, which was close enough to her real one that it gave Nico the lead he needed. Within minutes, they had her apartment address. Back at the clinic, Roman was pacing, ignoring the dull, aching throbbing in his jaw. The need to understand who she was had become an obsession far outweighing the need for revenge. When Nico brought him the intelligence, the picture of a tiny, quiet apartment building miles away from the city center. Roman's cold, calculating focus sharpened. She won't be there, Roman said immediately, looking at the cheap apartment photo. A fighter that knows to run immediately. She wouldn't risk going home. Nico nodded. We know. But she was headed in that general direction last night, just before midnight. She had to ditch her uniform, and her bag was still inside the restaurant. She has nothing. She'll come back for something personal, or she'll head for her next safe house, a place she hasn't used in years. Roman stared at the photo of Lena's face, captured from her restaurant ID badge. The eyes were the same, haunted, fierce, and strangely familiar. Find her second place, Nico. The place she ran to when she left the ring. Use the old connections. And pull the files on the fights from 5 years ago. Find the girl they called the Ghost. I need the whole story. Meanwhile, Lena was moving. After that sleepless night in the coffee shop, she knew she had to retrieve 2 things, her emergency cash reserve and a specific, small locket hidden deep in her apartment. She knew it was a colossal risk to go back, but that locket held the only proof she had of her past, the only reason she had run in the first place. She arrived back in her neighborhood near dawn, a residential area nestled close to a busy train line, the kind of area where people minded their own business and mostly kept their curtains closed. She moved slowly, using all the street skills she'd learned years ago. She checked every mirror, every parked car window, watching for the telltale signs of surveillance, cars parked too long, men waiting too still. As she reached her building, a sudden wave of instinct, stronger than her exhaustion, slammed into her. Danger. She didn't see anyone, but she felt eyes on her. Instead of going to her own front door, she slipped into the alleyway next to the building, a narrow, dark cut filled with bins and broken concrete. She stayed low, moving along the brick wall, listening. A shadow shifted at the mouth of the alley. It wasn't one of Roman's bodyguards. It was Roman himself. He was dressed casually now, a dark jacket, but the arrogance was still present in the stiffness of his stance. He was alone. That was the first surprise. Roman D'Angelo rarely walked anywhere without a small army. He saw her instantly. They stood about 20 feet apart, the stale alley air suddenly crackling with tension, like 2 high-voltage wires about to touch. Took you long enough, Waitress, Roman finally said, his voice quiet. He had a slight lisp now, muffled by the splint on his jaw, a constant, humiliating reminder of her skill. Lena didn't waste breath on fear. She was already coiled and ready. Her body moved before her mind did, scanning the scene for an escape route. Dead end. The only way out was past him. I'm not a waitress, Lena replied, her voice flat. And you're not as smart as you think you are, showing up here alone. Roman smirked, which was difficult and painful for him, making the gesture look more like a grimace. I'm exactly as smart as I need to be. And I'm alone because I don't want my cleanup crew scaring you. I didn't come here to hurt you, Lena. Not yet. He used her first name. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. The way he said it, like a cold, known fact, confirmed the full depth of his investigation. He knew who she was. Who is we? Roman demanded, taking a slow, deliberate step toward her. Who sent you? That punch, that was not random. That was professional. Tell me who you are working for. Lena didn't flinch. She just stared at him, her hazel eyes holding the weight of her terrible secret. She knew that if she spoke, she was admitting everything. She was exposing the real reason they were connected. I work for no one, Lena said, her voice shaking slightly, but with controlled defiance. And you deserved that punch a long time ago. Now move. Move? Roman laughed, a raw, painful sound that ended in a cough. You're telling me to move? You shattered my jaw in public and cost me $50 million in reputation, and you think you can tell me to move? He took another step, closing the distance. I know who you were. They called you the Ghost. You disappeared 5 years ago. You were one of the best welterweights in the underground circuit. But why did you disappear? And why, after all this time, did you reappear to punch me? Roman reached out, not to strike, but to grab her shoulder, to physically restrain her and force her to face him, to intimidate her with his size and proximity. Start talking, he insisted, his eyes boring into hers. This was his mistake. He thought her refusal to talk was fear. It wasn't. It was control. He thought he could dominate her with his history and his presence. But he was forgetting the first, most dangerous thing he had learned about her: she was fast. As his hand reached for her shoulder, Lena reacted with impossible speed. She didn't try to run away. She stepped in, closer to him, eliminating his reach advantage. Her left hand darted up, catching his descending arm and twisting it just enough to throw his weight off balance. Before he could correct himself, her right foot swept out in a low, sharp move, catching his ankle and leveraging his off-balance posture. Roman, already tenderized and unbalanced by the pain in his jaw, stumbled forward with a gasp of surprise. Instead of letting him fall, Lena used the movement to press her advantage. She didn't hit his jaw again, that was what he would expect. Instead, she drove a sharp, focused punch right into the center of his stomach, just below his ribs. The force of the blow was devastating. It wasn't designed to knock him out, but to drain his breath and his strength instantly. Roman doubled over with a muffled cry of pain, the air rushing out of his lungs in a sharp, wheezing sound. Lena didn't linger. She kept her balance, her feet barely moving. She was already out of the small window of time he needed to recover. She backed away 2 steps, watching him clutch his stomach, his face a mixture of agony and raw, dawning respect. That, Lena whispered, her voice fierce with determination, is my answer. I don't talk to bullies. Then, she turned and sprinted, not for the front door of her apartment, but out of the back alley and toward the train tracks, disappearing into the maze of the city, dissolving into the dawn. Roman slowly straightened up, leaning heavily against the brick wall, trying desperately to regain his breath. He was defeated again, physically outmatched by the very person he was trying to capture. He felt the humiliating reality sink in, not just the pain in his gut, but the profound respect for her skill. She could have shattered his face again. She could have left him unable to move. But she hadn't. She had simply proven, again, that he could not touch her. He pulled out his phone and pressed the speed dial for Nico. New orders, Roman gasped into the receiver, still fighting for air. She's not just the ghost. She's better than I remember. Stop the search for the old ring. She is coming after me. I need protection, and I need to find the connection. It's personal, Nico. And I want to know exactly what happened 5 years ago that makes her look at me like I stole her soul. Lena was gone, but her message was clear: she was no longer running. She was fighting, and her enemy finally understood that this wasn't about a debt or a job. It was about justice, and it was about a history that was far more tangled and heartbreaking than Roman D'Angelo could have ever imagined. This story shows us that true strength isn't always about the size of the man, but the depth of the pain the person fighting carries. If you've ever been underestimated and then had to show the world what you're made of, let us know by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next move in Lena's fight. The second time Lena vanished, she didn't just disappear into the crowd, she retreated into the deepest folds of her training. After leaving Roman doubled over in that alley, she knew the luxury of simply hiding was gone forever. Roman was dangerous, but he was also predictable in his arrogance. Now, someone else was in play. She had spent the last 2 days moving between old, forgotten safe zones, dilapidated shipping containers near the docks, empty industrial units far outside the city limits. These were places she had learned to live in during her underground days, places only a fighter on the run would know. It was during a quiet, nervous evening in a cold warehouse near the port lands that she found the clue. She had risked going back to the apartment, not for the locket, but for the one thing she couldn't live without: a specialized set of lockpicking tools and a small, high-powered lens. She used the tools to break into a high-security lockbox at a forgotten storage unit, retrieving a worn leather satchel filled with old maps, notes, and photos, evidence from her life 5 years ago. She was looking for patterns, for the fingerprints of the people who had destroyed everything. As she spread the old, dusty files out, her attention was abruptly pulled back to the present. She noticed a disturbance near the perimeter fence, a broken lock that wasn't broken when she arrived. Instinct, honed by years of constant vigilance, screamed at her. She didn't run. She ducked, melting into the deep shadows behind a towering stack of wooden pallets, her eyes scanning the dark, cavernous space. A moment later, a beam of light sliced through the darkness. It was slow, professional, and searching. It wasn't Roman's men, they would have been faster, louder, confident in their numbers. This was a single operative, moving with caution and deadly intent. Then, she saw it, the barrel of a long-range weapon, cold and metallic, sweeping methodically through the shadows. A sniper. Lena's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the chilling realization, she wasn't just being hunted for disrespecting Roman. Someone wanted her dead, and they didn't want the risk of a confrontation. They wanted a clean, silent execution. As the figure moved closer, Lena waited, perfectly still, listening to the subtle click of the rifle bolt and the soft scrape of the man's boots on the concrete floor. When he passed her stack of pallets, she struck. It was a silent, lethal takedown. She used her body weight, slamming the man's rifle hand into the corner of the wooden pallet before delivering a blinding knee strike that dropped him instantly. He was a professional, strong and fast, but Lena was motivated by the ghost of her past. She disabled him before he could fire a shot or even let out a full cry, leaving him unconscious and securely bound with the zip ties she always carried. She immediately turned her attention to the rifle. This was the key. She used her high-powered lens to examine the weapon's serial numbers, the customizations, and the subtle marks left by its owners. This wasn't a standard-issue military rifle. It was customized, high-end, and expensive. She cross-referenced the unique markings against the old photographs and notes in her satchel, the evidence she had collected 5 years ago. She held her breath as she scanned the images of guns and equipment used in that long-ago ambush that had shattered her life. And there it was. A match. The specific type of stock modification, the custom sight mounts, even the faint, etched symbol of a viper, it was the signature of the Salazar crew, the ruthless organization Roman D'Angelo's faction had been fighting, and sometimes working with, 5 years ago. They were the ones who had ambushed her, not Roman. The realization hit her with the force of a gut punch. They were hunting her again. But why now? Why only after she punched Roman? As Lena investigated the sniper, miles away in his secure, makeshift command center, Roman was having his own startling realization. Nico had spent the last 48 hours following Roman's frantic orders, clean the internet and find the ghost's history. The video was proving impossible to completely erase, but the search for her past had yielded something far more disturbing. Nico laid a stack of heavily redacted police and hospital reports on Roman's desk. They dated back 5 years, detailing a violent, messy confrontation at an underground fight club that ended in multiple deaths and a devastating fire. "We found her, Roman," Nico stated, his voice tight. Lena, or the ghost, was at the center of this. She was in the ring when the fight turned into a bloodbath. She was with someone, a man named Elias. He was her training partner, her protector, and, according to the records, her fiancé. Roman stared at the papers, not connecting the dots. So? She was a fighter. They were attacked by the Salazar crew, our rivals. What does this have to do with me? Nico flipped the page, pointing to a name buried deep in the testimony. Elias was the primary target, Roman. He was refusing to throw a specific fight, a fight that would have cost the Salazar crew millions. When he wouldn't cooperate, they attacked the arena. Elias died that night, trying to protect Lena. Roman's face was suddenly pale, the color draining away even under the bruising around his jaw. He finally understood the cold fire in her eyes, the one that said, "You stole my soul." "And what does that have to do with me?" Roman repeated, his voice low, but now tinged with genuine fear. Because, Roman, Nico said, lowering his voice, we have been listening to chatter. We haven't found Lena, but we found something else. Salazar knows you've been knocked out. They know you're weak, and they know you're hunting her. They have put a very large bounty out, not just on Lena for surviving the original ambush, but on both of you. Nico pushed another, smaller piece of paper forward. It was a recent encrypted message, intercepted by Roman's intelligence team. Eliminate the D'Angelo threat and silence the ghost. 2 birds with 1 stone. Target located near the Port Lands docks. Roman stood up, stumbling slightly, the pain in his body forgotten, replaced by a deep, terrifying certainty. His jaw was broken not by a random waitress, but by a survivor of an attack he knew everything about, an attack that had involved the most brutal faction of his rivals. And now, Salazar thought Roman and Lena were working together. The realization hit Roman with the weight of a truck. He hadn't been fighting a random waitress, he had been fighting his own failure to protect his territory years ago. And now, her attempt at revenge, that single, humiliating punch, had linked them together in the sights of a far deadlier enemy. They think we're colluding, Roman whispered, pacing the room frantically. They think she's my weapon, bringing down my rivals. They think I sent her to draw attention to them. This wasn't about dominance anymore. This was about survival. Roman realized that his order for Lena to be kept alive was the only thing keeping him alive, too. If Salazar killed Lena before he talked to her, Roman would never understand the full picture, and he would be next. Back at the warehouse, Lena had finished examining the rifle and the unconscious sniper. She took the man's phone, overriding the security lock, and sent a single, anonymous message to Roman's known private number, a number she had spent years trying to forget. Salazar. They tried to kill me. They think we're partners. Get off the grid. Find me if you want to live. She didn't wait for a reply. She left the sniper tied up with a note for the police, gathered her bag, and melted back into the night. She had run from Roman for 5 years because of the terrible association he had with her pain. Now, the people who had truly murdered the man she loved were back, and the only person who had the power, the resources, and the motive to help her survive was Roman D'Angelo. We often think the person who hurts us the most is the biggest enemy, but sometimes, the shared experience of pain reveals an even bigger, darker truth about the world. Lena went from wanting to destroy Roman to needing his help to survive the very people who destroyed her life. That unexpected shift in perspective can change everything. If you believe enemies can become allies when the stakes are high enough, hit that heart emoji in the comments and let us know what you think Lena should do next. The enemy had moved, but so had Lena. The humiliated king and the ghost fighter were no longer separate entities. They were targets sharing a common hunter, and their reluctant, desperate collision was now the only thing standing between them and the grave. Roman D'Angelo was not a man who ever had to consider the wisdom of a text message sent by an unknown number. His life was built on layers of protection and control. Yet, when his phone buzzed and he read the single, chilling word Salazar, followed by the warning, he didn't dismiss it. He couldn't. The pain in his jaw and the knowledge that his reputation was bleeding out on the internet were proof enough that Lena was operating on a level he hadn't prepared for. His intelligence team confirmed it an hour later. An unconscious, zip-tied sniper with a distinctive, high-end rifle had been found near the Port Lands docks. The rifle was traced back to a shell company known to be a front for the Salazar crew. Someone had tried to kill the ghost, and in doing so, had confirmed her desperate warning. Roman looked at Nico, his face grim. She didn't just punch me. She saved my life by drawing fire. They think we're in this together. And if Salazar thinks it, then they are aiming at both of us. There was no time for arrogance. Roman had 2 choices: send his army out to hunt Salazar and likely fail to find them before they struck again, or use the one person who Salazar wanted dead more than anyone else, Lena. Find her, Roman ordered, the pain in his voice forgotten in the urgency of survival. Use the back channels. Don't use force. Tell her I have the files she needs, and I need a meeting. Tell her I understand about Elias. Nico found her in a quiet, working-class neighborhood in North York, sheltering in a forgotten garage owned by a former friend. He didn't approach her directly. He found a trusted intermediary, a small-time bookie who had once owed the ghost a large favor. The message was delivered on a burner phone. Elias. Records. Roman is waiting. The meeting took place that evening, not in a flashy tower, but in the sterile safety of an empty storage facility outside the city, a perfect neutral ground that offered both privacy and multiple escape routes. Roman arrived with Nico and two silent guards who stayed a discreet distance away. Lena arrived alone, wearing dark clothes and carrying nothing but the heavy memory of the life Roman's world had stolen. She moved into the center of the vast, echoing room. Roman stood waiting, his bruised jaw making his face look tight and unnatural. The air between them was thick with hostility and old pain. Elias wouldn't want you here, Lena said immediately, her voice low and rough, cutting straight to the core of the issue. Roman held up a hand, a gesture of weary truce, not authority. He wouldn't. But he also wouldn't want Salazar to walk over his grave. I'm not here to apologize for the past, Lena. I'm here because your punch just started a war that we both have to finish. He gestured to Nico, who silently placed a thick, sealed envelope on an overturned crate between them. Inside that envelope, Roman continued, his eyes locked on hers, are copies of all my internal intelligence files regarding the Salazar Cruz operations 5 years ago. Their targets, their movements, and the people inside my organization who gave them the information that led to the ambush at the ring. Lena didn't move toward the envelope. She kept her gaze fixed on him, searching for the lie. Why? Because I need you, Roman admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. To admit need was the ultimate humiliation, but his life was on the line. Salazar thinks we're partners. They want to eliminate both the disgraced king and the ghost who came back. If they think we're working together, we have to actually do it. He paused, letting the bitter truth settle. You are the best fighter I have ever seen. You took me out in one shot while nursing a 5-year-old vendetta. You caught the sniper they sent after you. You know how they operate better than anyone. I need your eyes on my security, and your fists when things go bad. He made her the offer, not with arrogance, but with cold, businesslike necessity. Help me find the traitor inside my network who tipped Salazar off to our supposed partnership. Help me crush Salazar before they kill us both. And when the job is done, I give you the originals of those files, and you walk away with the justice you deserve. Lena was silent for a long moment. Justice. That was the word that had haunted her for 5 years. The price of that justice had always been her safety. Now, the price was working side by side with the very man whose world had created her misery. You're telling me that the only way for me to get justice for Elias is to keep the man who indirectly caused his death alive, she asked, her voice laced with venom. I'm telling you that the only way to kill Salazar is to use me as bait, Roman countered, matching her intensity. And the only way to get the proof that puts Salazar away for good is to work together. It's an alliance of necessity, Lena. Nothing more. Lena finally took a step forward, not toward the files, but closer to Roman. The two men, one massive and powerful, the other lean and lethal, stood toe to toe. She raised her hand and, with no warning, she slapped him hard across the undamaged cheek. It was a quick, sharp strike, fueled by years of repressed rage. Roman didn't flinch, didn't even move to strike back. He just stared at her, accepting the blow, accepting the price of their forced partnership. The two guards took a collective step forward, but Roman raised a hand and they instantly froze. You got one punch for the humiliation, Roman said, his voice even. That one was for Elias. Now we are even. Do we have a deal, Ghost? Lena's chest rose and fell rapidly. She knew this was the worst decision she would ever make, and yet, the only way forward. She needed those names, the proof that her pain was not random, but manufactured. She looked at the files, then back at Roman. Her eyes, still filled with sadness, now held a dangerous spark of purpose. The deal is simple, Roman, she said, her voice clear. We work my way. You listen. You don't touch me, and you don't touch anyone I need to talk to. I find the traitor, and you give me Salazar. Then we walk away and never see each other again. Agreed, Roman nodded, his injured jaw throbbing. And just like that, the most unlikely and explosive alliance in the city was forged. The king and the ghost were now targets together, forced to trust the one person they each had the best reason to hate. They started immediately. Lena ignored Roman's lavish security details and instead began scrutinizing his inner circle, studying the video feeds of Nico and Marco, looking for the tiny, almost invisible cracks that signaled betrayal. In the days that followed, the clash between them was constant. Roman was used to barking orders, Lena responded only to logic and proof. He tried to intimidate her, she responded with a sharp elbow to his ribs, earning another raw cough and a look of stunned surprise. Their interactions were a tense dance of wills, but beneath the hostility, a strange new respect began to form. Roman saw her discipline, her refusal to be bullied, and her surgical approach to danger. Lena saw that the man was, underneath the arrogance, brilliant and relentlessly focused on survival. They were two wolves, trapped in the same snare, fighting the same hunter. It's amazing how quickly necessity can forge a bond stronger than any friendship. When the stakes are life and death, your enemy can become the most dependable person in the room. If you're gripped by this unexpected partnership, show us some love by tapping that like button and letting us know what alias you think Salazar is using to hide. The enemy had moved, but now, so had the alliance. Lena picked up the file and looked at Roman. The humiliation was still fresh, but the survival instinct was stronger. They were no longer fighting each other. They were fighting for the ghost of a past they both desperately needed to bury. Chess Pawn Chapter 7, The Coup Within. The forced alliance between Roman and Lena was not quiet. It was a constant barrage of tense silence and sharp, strategic exchanges that sounded more like a chess match than a conversation. Roman provided the network and the files, Lena provided the laser focus and the fighter's instinct, scrutinizing his world for the betrayal she knew was there. They worked out of a heavily secured, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place Roman's family had used for storage decades ago. It was ugly, cold, and perfect because nobody knew it existed. Lena had zeroed in on the organization's most trusted advisors, focusing primarily on the two men closest to Roman, Marco, the loud, aggressive enforcer, and Nico, the quiet, meticulous intelligence man. It's Nico, Lena announced one tense evening, slamming a printout onto a battered metal table. Roman was nursing another headache and trying to decipher complex financial ledgers. Impossible, Roman scoffed, pushing the papers away. Nico has been with my family since I was 10. His loyalty is personified. Marco, maybe. He's reckless and always wanted more power. Lena shook her head, her eyes burning with frustrating certainty. Marco acts like a traitor. Nico is one. Look at the data, Roman. When the Salazar crew attacked the ring 5 years ago, they knew exactly where Elias would be, and what the payoff would be. Only 3 people knew that information besides Elias, the fight promoter, me, and the person who managed the betting syndicate's records. She pointed to a list of names. Nico ran your father's books on the betting side. He was the one who would have known the exact financial damage of Elias not throwing the fight. The sniper who tried to kill me, the one I tied up? He was using a gun registered through a paper trail managed by Nico's shell companies. Marco is too loud to be a good traitor. Nico is the quiet leak, the slow poisoning of your network. Roman stared at the evidence, a cold wave washing over him. The realization wasn't just about betrayal, it was about the depth of it. Nico wasn't just a disgruntled employee. He was practically family. He finally stood, leaning his hands on the table, his eyes dark with a dawning, terrible understanding. If Nico is the leak, he wouldn't be doing it for Salazar's small change. He's doing it for something bigger. He wants the whole thing. Roman immediately activated a series of secret protocols his father, the true D'Angelo patriarch, had set up years ago, a ghost trail that allowed him to see Nico's financial movements without Nico knowing he was being watched. It took a harrowing 3 hours of digging through encrypted accounts and old, forgotten ledgers, but the truth finally erupted, devastating and complete. Nico wasn't just a traitor. He was orchestrating a full-blown coup, and the single punch Lena had thrown was the catalyst he needed to trigger his plan. "He's not working for Salazar," Roman whispered, his voice heavy with shock. "He's working with them. But they aren't his boss, they're his hired muscle." Roman slammed his fist down onto the ledger, ignoring the pain. "Nico is trying to take over the family. He's been moving assets, making deals, and gathering power in the shadows for years." Lena, despite her years of dealing with ruthless people, felt a chill. The quiet, loyal, seemingly boring bookkeeper was aiming for the throne. "Why now?" Lena pressed. "Why use me? Your humiliation was bad, but it wouldn't be enough to turn the whole family against you." Roman flipped the ledger to a marked page, his finger tracing a line of transfers made just days after the knockout video went viral. The destination account was a numbered shell company, and the amount was massive. "This transfer is the key," Roman explained, his voice strained. "He paid Salazar a fortune to eliminate both of us and frame the assassination attempt on the D'Angelo family's main rival, the Montani crew." He looked up at Lena, his eyes hollowed with the betrayal. "But the leverage, the real leverage isn't the punch, Lena. It's what you represent." Roman then told her the truth about Elias, the truth that only 3 people in the organization knew. Elias, Lena's fiancé, hadn't just been a fighter, he had been the adopted nephew of Vittorio D'Angelo, Roman's aging father and the head of the entire family. Elias was a secret Roman's father had kept, knowing that his nephew's existence would complicate Roman's succession. "Elias was next in line to the throne before me," Roman revealed, the words tasting like poison. "My father was training him in secret, just in case. When Elias was killed, my father was devastated, and the path was cleared for me." Nico knew all of this. He paused, letting the devastating connection sink in. Nico is using the records of Elias's death. He's going to reveal to the family council that Elias was murdered by Salazar, and that I, the one who stood to gain, did nothing to avenge him. He'll say I was too weak, too distracted, or worse, that I was secretly involved. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "And now that you've reappeared, Elias's grieving fiancé, the ghost, a survivor of the attack, Nico will use you as proof. He'll claim I failed to protect the family bloodline, and now I'm too compromised to even find the woman who exposed my weakness. My being humiliated by you is the perfect curtain raiser for his coup." Lena felt dizzy. The man she loved, the reason for her 5 years of pain, was not just a fighter, he was a king in waiting. And her attempt at a small, public revenge had been perfectly timed and weaponized by Roman's oldest enemy, the man sitting right next to him. "He planned this for years," Lena murmured, looking at the complex flowcharts of money and power. "He waited for you to slip up, and I gave him the perfect opening. I didn't just ruin my life, I triggered a civil war." Roman looked at her, no longer with suspicion, but with a terrible, reluctant understanding. "The only way to stop Nico is to expose his treachery before he uses Elias and you against me. We have to prove that Nico is the one in league with Salazar, not me." Lena walked over to the corner of the warehouse, her fists clenched, her mind processing the sheer scope of the betrayal. She had been running from Roman's world, only to find that she was the unwitting key to the coup within. This is the scary part of life, isn't it? Realizing that the small choices we make can have gigantic, unintended consequences, and that the person you trusted the most might be holding the biggest knife. In the comments, tell us which movie character this level of hidden betrayal reminds you of. The forced alliance had just become a desperate partnership. They had gone from enemies to allies, and now, they were partners in a desperate mission to expose the biggest traitor in D'Angelo history. Roman and Lena were 2 people who had every reason to walk away from each other, but the ghost of Elias and the looming threat of Nico's power play had irrevocably bound them together. They had to act fast, because the coup within was already in motion. The plan was audacious, desperate, and utterly terrifying. Nico's coup was moving too fast. He had already begun poisoning the D'Angelo family council with rumors of Roman's incompetence, claiming Roman was secretly allied with Salazar and trying to undermine the family. Roman knew the only way to expose Nico's hand, and show the council who the real traitor was to draw Nico and Salazar into the open where they felt safest. And where would a shadowy traitor and an illegal crew feel safest? In the one place Roman D'Angelo could never control, the underground arena. Roman stood in the cold warehouse, staring at Lena. Nico used the fight circuit to funnel money and leverage against us. Salazar runs most of the high-stakes illegal fights now. We need to hit them where they make their deals. Lena knew instantly what he meant. The ring. The place where Elias had died. No, Lena said flatly, her eyes dark and completely unyielding. I won't go back there. I'm not fighting for your family's power. You're fighting for your life, Lena, Roman countered, his voice low and firm. He didn't try to demand, he appealed to logic. Nico's proof rests on showing I failed to avenge Elias and that I'm now partnered with the enemy who murdered him. If you show up at Salazar's biggest arena, if you fight their champion and expose their operation, you force them to panic and react. They'll try to grab you or kill you, and Nico will have to show his hand to protect his partners. He walked over to the metal table and placed the files detailing Elias's death right next to her. This is the only way to get justice. You draw them out, you get your proof, and we both walk away alive. Lena looked at the papers, at the faded picture of Elias, and felt the familiar, crippling wave of grief mix with a new, potent need for action. She had run from this arena for 5 years, but now, it was the only path to peace. Fine, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. But I fight under my name. Not for show. I fight to send a message. The arena was located deep beneath an abandoned industrial complex in the older part of the city, accessible only through a network of dark, winding tunnels. The air was thick with sweat, cheap beer, and the raw energy of hundreds of people packed tight, cheering for blood and money. It was everything Lena remembered, only louder, darker, and more menacing. Roman was there, too, hidden high up in a secure, shadowed box overlooking the ring. He wore a heavy, dark coat and kept his injured jaw masked by a scarf. He felt every eye in the room, knowing that half the people down there were his own men, ready to move when he gave the signal, and the other half were Salazar's, ready to spot an intrusion. The lights in the arena suddenly dimmed. The air crackled with anticipation. The announcer, a massive man whose voice boomed over the cheap speakers, grabbed the microphone. Tonight, gentlemen, we have a special, unscheduled event. You all know our reigning king, the Hammer, a man who has never lost a fight on this concrete. But tonight, we have a challenger. A legend. Someone who walked away 5 years ago, but has decided that the money and the glory were too good to pass up. The crowd, eager for a surprise, started to roar. She was a blur. A nightmare. A ghost. Put your hands together for the return of the ghost. As the announcer screamed the name, the crowd exploded. They knew the legend. The whispered stories of the fighter who was impossible to hit were part of the arena's folklore. Lena walked out, wearing simple black shorts and a tight athletic top. She didn't look like a warrior. She looked slight, quiet, and absolutely composed. But as she moved, the familiar rhythm returned. Her shoulders were loose, her hands were relaxed, and her eyes were fixed on the goal. She looked like a predator who had finally returned to the hunt. The crowd began chanting her old name, a rhythmic, pulsing sound, Ghost. 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 In the observation box, Roman watched, stunned. He knew she was good. He had felt it. But this was different. This was a force of nature. Her opponent, the Hammer, was enormous, a granite-solid man with the kind of bulk that usually won every fight through sheer gravity. He swaggered toward the center of the ring, confident that the small, nervous-looking woman would be an easy kill. The bell rang. The Hammer immediately charged, relying on brute power to overwhelm her. Lena didn't run. She stood firm, watching him with an unnerving calm. At the last possible second, when the hammer was fully committed to his massive swing, she tilted her head barely an inch. The punch sliced past her ear with a rush of air. Lena stepped into the opening created by his miss. She moved with a brutal, clinical precision that took Roman's breath away. She delivered 3 lightning-fast body shots, not to his muscles, but to the soft, unprotected points of his ribs and solar plexus. The blows were so fast they sounded like a single, devastating impact. The hammer stopped dead in his tracks, his massive lungs suddenly emptied of air. He looked bewildered, staggering backward. Then, Lena finished it. She moved into the staggered man, sidestepping his desperate grab, and delivered a short, sharp uppercut that snapped his head back. It wasn't the knockout punch she gave Roman, but it was enough. The big man crashed onto the canvas, convulsing once before lying still, completely dismantled. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. The arena went silent for a beat, followed by an explosion of noise far greater than before. The crowd didn't just cheer, they screamed in awe and disbelief. The ghost was real, and she was back. In the secure box, Roman lowered his scarf, his eyes wide. This was not the timid waitress. This was a brutal, focused weapon. He hadn't just punched him in a moment of panic, she had demonstrated absolute control over her environment. He felt a profound sense of respect, and a terrible fear for the enemies who would now pursue her. But the chaos in the arena was exactly what they needed. Down on the floor, 2 men near the ring ropes, known associates of Salazar, were whispering frantically into their phones, their eyes darting nervously toward the tunnels, clearly reporting the disastrous and unexpected comeback. And then, in the section just behind Roman's box, an unassuming figure quietly got up from his seat, his hand clutching a burner phone. It was Nico. His face, usually controlled, was pale with fury and panic. The success of Lena's fight meant disaster for his plans. She was drawing too much attention, too fast. He had to stop her before the D'Angelo family noticed the sudden spike in Salazar activity. Roman watched through the darkened glass as Nico quickly whispered into his phone, clearly demanding that Salazar agents act now. Nico was moving to clean up the mess Lena had created. He was exposing his hand. Roman touched his earpiece, activating the comms to his men positioned around the arena. Nico just gave the order to move on the ghost, Roman murmured into the mic, his eyes fixed on the man who had betrayed his father. He's running to the escape tunnels. Get the evidence. The coup is over. Lena stood in the center of the ring, breathing easily, ignoring the frantic cheering. She looked up toward the shadowed box, knowing Roman was there. She had done it. She had stepped back into the nightmare and forced the enemy into the open. She didn't just dismantle a champion, she dismantled Nico's plan. She looked down at the concrete floor of the arena, the ghost of Elias finally feeling a tiny bit lighter. The time for running was done. The time for justice had begun. This is what happens when you decide to face your biggest fear head-on. The arena you ran from becomes the stage where you win your freedom. If you were Lena, what single item would you grab from the ring to prove the coup was happening? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to catch Roman and Lena's inevitable confrontation with the traitor. The chaos inside the underground arena was exactly what Roman had wanted. As the crowd erupted over the 30-second destruction of the hammer, Roman's men moved. Not toward the ring, but toward the escape tunnels where Nico, the panicking traitor, was heading. The coup was contained. Meanwhile, Roman remained focused on the ring. The fight promoter, a scarred man named Cyrus who ran the Salazar operation in the city, climbed into the ring to try and regain control. He was visibly angry, his face a mask of furious disbelief that his champion had been obliterated. "That's enough, Ghost!" Cyrus roared, snatching the microphone. "The spectacle is over. You've made your point. Now, who sent you?" Lena ignored him. She was moving, not with speed, but with deliberation, looking for any sign of a familiar face in the crowd, anyone who might have been part of Elias's life. Then, from the back tunnels, a figure emerged. He was dressed in a dark, heavy fighting outfit, his face completely covered by a featureless black mask. He walked with a familiar, slow authority that cut through the noise. "I sent her," the masked man's voice boomed over the speakers, rough and distorted by the mask's internal microphone. The crowd went silent again. This was clearly someone important. This was the real spectacle. Lena froze. The way the man moved, the slight, deliberate tilt of his head, the set of his shoulders, it was all too familiar. "Mentor?" Lena whispered, a horrified realization dawning on her. The masked man slowly walked across the ring toward Lena. Cyrus, the promoter, stepped back in deference. He clearly knew who this was. "You've been reckless, Lena," the masked man said, his voice laced with years of disappointment. "You shouldn't have come back. Not for this petty vengeance." Lena felt her legs tremble. This couldn't be. This was the man who had taught her everything, the man who had been a second father to Elias, their mentor, Jared. They all believed he had died in the fire 5 years ago, defending the gym they shared. "Jared?" Lena choked out, tears of disbelief and agony stinging her eyes. "You're alive? Where have you been?" Jared raised his hands, one palm facing her, a classic signal they used in training for absolute calm. "I survived, barely. The fire took most of me, but I lived in the shadows, waiting for the right moment." Waiting for him. He spun around and pointed a gloved finger directly at Roman's shadowed observation box. Roman, who had been focused on watching Nico's capture, now felt the entire arena's attention snap back onto him. He knew he was supposed to be a ghost in that box, yet Jared had pinpointed him instantly. Jared leaned close to Lena, his voice dropping but still booming through the speakers, making sure the entire arena, and everyone listening on Roman's hidden comms, heard him. "I came back for you, Lena. And for the truth you missed. You think this man, Roman D'Angelo, is just a crime boss who hurt you? He's worse." Lena stumbled back a step. The reunion, the shock of finding her mentor alive, was dissolving into raw terror. Jared turned back to Roman's box, his voice ringing with years of simmering hatred. "You're telling everyone that Salazar and Nico betrayed your family, Roman. But you're lying to yourself. Nico had to pay Salazar for the cleanup because you were there that night." A collective gasp swept through the hundreds of spectators. Jared continued, relentless, "Roman D'Angelo, you were at the arena 5 years ago. You were there when the fire started. And you weren't there to stop the attack on Elias. You were there to make sure Elias D'Angelo died." The world stopped for Lena. The air left her lungs entirely. 5 years of grieving, 5 years of running, 5 years of planning a life based on the knowledge that Roman's world killed Elias, not that Roman himself was the executioner. Roman, watching from above, felt a cold dread settle in his bones. He was stunned. He hadn't been there. He couldn't have been. He had spent that night finalizing a large deal across the city. His alibis were ironclad. Yet, the memory felt hazy, distant. He knew his father and Elias had been at odds, but he couldn't recall being at the arena. He immediately keyed his mic to Nico, who was now detained by Roman's men in the tunnel below. "Nico. Was I there that night? Tell me the truth." Nico's captured voice crackled through Roman's private earpiece, full of bitter triumph. "You were, Roman. Your father sent you to collect Elias and stop the fight, but you wanted him out of the way. You backed out at the last second, but you were there. I managed the damage control. The internal records show you were on site. The coup may have been stopped, but the bullet it fired had just hit Roman square in the heart." He felt his head spin with the shock of betrayal, but also with the insidious, sickening possibility that his own memory had been manipulated, that he was capable of a monstrous act he couldn't recall. In the ring, Lena's eyes were locked on Jared. "Is it true, Jared?" she whispered, her voice broken. "Roman was there? He let Elias burn?" Jared slowly reached up and pulled the mask down. His face was a roadmap of scarred tissue, half melted by the fire. He was a survivor, but a deeply wounded one. He was there, Lena, Jared confirmed, his voice now rough with emotion. I saw him. He walked away while the fire spread. The proof of his presence is buried deeper than Nico's accounts. Lena dropped to her knees on the canvas, the exhaustion and the years of running suddenly crushing her. The man who had been her reluctant ally, the one she had let live, was now revealed to be the true villain, the one who bore the heaviest guilt for Elias's death. The crowd was roaring again, this time with confused fury, sensing a massive internal feud, a blood revelation that went far deeper than a boxing match. The whole arena felt like it was tearing itself apart. In the box, Roman knew the game had changed entirely. His alliance with Lena was dead. Jared, his family's oldest enemy who should have been dead, had returned, not just to exact revenge on Roman, but to utterly destroy him by using the one person Roman desperately needed to trust. He looked down at Lena, devastated and broken in the ring. The last 5 years of her life had been a lie, and he was at the center of it. Roman grabbed the phone. He had to act. He had to get out of the box and stop Jared before Lena, consumed by justified rage, killed him. But even worse than killing him, Lena might believe Jared and join him, turning the ghost into a weapon aimed directly at the heart of the D'Angelo family. Nico, Roman bit out into the phone, his voice shaking with urgency. Did you plant the records confirming my presence? Tell me the truth. Nico cackled over the line. Truth? Roman, you'll never know the truth. You killed the rightful heir, Elias. And now, Lena will destroy you for it. I just needed to push the lever. Roman slammed the phone down. He was cornered, betrayed, and fighting against a history he couldn't remember. Lena looked up at the box one last time, her hazel eyes not just haunted now, but totally empty. The sorrow and the rage had reached a pitch so high it had silenced her completely. She stood up, not looking at Jared, but at the dark box where Roman was hiding. Her alliance was over. Her purpose was clear. Sometimes, the truth hurts worse than any lie, because it shatters the very ground you stand on. Lena had her justice, but it came at the cost of her heart. Think about this, if Roman was truly innocent, what would be the single piece of evidence he'd need to prove his alibi from 5 years ago? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to witness the heartbreaking end of this desperate alliance. The ghost was back, but now, she was alone, fueled by the most devastating revelation of her life. She had to face the man who had loved and taught her, the man who was lying, and the man who might be guilty of the ultimate betrayal the moment Jared, the supposedly deceased mentor, pointed his scarred finger and revealed the staggering accusation that Roman had been present and complicit in Elias's death. The alliance between Lena and Roman shattered. Lena didn't wait. She moved instantly, spinning away from Jared and vaulting over the ring ropes. She didn't seek escape, she sought solitude. She needed a place to process the blinding, agonizing truth that the man she had reluctantly agreed to trust was the monster she had been hunting all along. Her heart, which had just begun to thaw in the face of a common enemy, froze over completely. She disappeared into the maze of the tunnels, ignoring the frantic calls of Jared and the shouts of the arena security. In his observation box, Roman was reeling, his hands gripped white-knuckled on the railing. Jared's accusation, supported by Nico's bitter confirmation, was a fatal blow to his reputation, his family standing, and his newfound partnership with Lena. But more than that, it was a profound, nauseating shock to his own identity. Could I have done that? Could I have stood by while my own relative burned? Roman wasn't a good man, but he wasn't a casual murderer. The possibility that he was capable of such cold-blooded betrayal, especially against Elias, the only other person his father had ever truly cared about, sickened him. He immediately called his most trusted, non-Nico-affiliated security team into the box. Get me the surveillance from the arena 5 years ago. Every angle, every second. Get me the records on my movements that night. I need the truth, now. Roman's world was collapsing, and he knew he had only a few hours before the family council, informed by Nico's planted rumors, moved to strip him of his authority. He had to prove Jared was lying, or he was finished, and Lena would never forgive him. Roman, aided by his loyal head of security, Damon, spent the next frantic hours deep in the D'Angelo mainframe, pulling up old, deeply encrypted files that only his father and a select few were supposed to know about. They started with Roman's documented movements 5 years prior, the night of the fire. The initial report, the one Nico had confirmed, showed Roman entering the industrial zone where the arena was located. The proof was undeniable, he was physically there. Damon looked worriedly at Roman. The timestamps match, Roman. You were clocked entering the zone at 11:45 p.m., moments before the fire alarm. Roman felt the walls closing in. He looked at the hazy, distant memory of that night, the metallic taste in his mouth, the feeling of pressure, the blurred faces. It felt like a dream. No, Roman insisted, tapping the file on the screen. I was supposed to be finalizing the North End deal that night. My alibi was supposed to be ironclad. Why did my father's records put me here? Damon, a man who saw the truth only in numbers and data, clicked open a heavily shielded archive file labeled Initiation, RD, 2017. What they uncovered next was the true, monstrous betrayal that had been hidden from Roman for half a decade. The file wasn't about a deal, it was about Roman's mandatory, secret initiation into the highest levels of the D'Angelo family. An initiation that required him to prove his coldness and loyalty, a practice kept alive from the family's old-world roots. The surveillance video attached to the file wasn't from the arena's security, it was from a small, secret camera planted inside the VIP box overlooking the ring. The quality was poor, but the sound was clear. The video started with Roman, looking visibly younger and confused, being ushered into the box by his father's bodyguards, the same box he had just occupied. He was unsteady on his feet. Look at his eyes, Roman, Damon pointed out. They're dilated. He's sweating, but his heart rate is too low. He's been drugged. Roman watched his younger self on the screen. He was nodding robotically, his movements sluggish. The audio then clearly captured Roman's father, the stoic Vittorio D'Angelo, speaking to Nico in low, cold tones. He needs to see it. He needs to believe he has crossed the line, or he will never be strong enough to lead. Elias is too much of a soft heart. Tonight, we make Roman strong. The video showed Roman being led to the balcony. Below, Elias was arguing with the Salazar agents. The fire started moments later. Roman, the drugged figure on the screen, watched for a full minute as Elias fought desperately, engulfed by smoke and flames, before being dragged away by the bodyguards. The footage confirmed Roman's presence at the arena. But it also proved that Roman was not a willing participant. He was a puppet, heavily sedated with a powerful truth serum and hallucinogen, forced by his own father to watch the death of his cousin, ensuring Roman would forever believe he was complicit. The trauma of the event, coupled with the drugs, caused Roman to completely suppress the memory. Damon looked at the timeline, his jaw slack. Your father used that night to remove his rival heir, Elias, and simultaneously break you, Roman. He created the perfect lie. He made you believe you were a killer so you would never question your own capacity for cruelty, and he used Nico to handle the fake paper trail. The full, multi-layered betrayal hit Roman like a physical blow. His father, the man he spent his life trying to impress, had poisoned him, forced him to witness a family murder, and then manipulated his entire memory to mold him into a ruthless successor. Nico wasn't just working for a coup, he was working to expose a lie orchestrated by the head of the D'Angelo family. Roman now understood Jared's scarred face and Nico's triumph. Jared saw Roman walk away and assumed guilt. Nico knew the truth and was using the false memory to destroy Roman. Roman had his alibi. More than that, he had proof that his life had been a devastating lie orchestrated by his own father to ensure his absolute, unquestioning leadership. He picked up the phone to call Lena, to share the terrifying truth and expose his father's ultimate crime. But he knew she wouldn't answer. She had vanished, her trust shattered beyond repair. He looked at the footage of himself, young and drugged, watching his cousin burn. The pain in his chest was sharper than the pain in his jaw. He had spent his life running from a phantom guilt that wasn't his own. He slammed his hand on the desk, the years of cold arrogance finally dissolving into righteous fury. Nico is not the final boss, Roman growled, looking at Damon. My father is. We have to find Lena. We have to show her this footage. This isn't about power anymore. It's about saving the woman I just betrayed and exposing the real villain. Lena was gone, moving through the city, her heart broken, convinced Roman D'Angelo was her sworn enemy. Roman, armed with the devastating truth of his initiation and his father's unforgivable manipulation, knew the broken alliance was the only path to survival. They had to reunite to face the true architect of the coup and the lie, Vittorio D'Angelo. Sometimes, the truth that sets you free is the one that destroys everything you thought you knew. Roman went from fearing a killer's past to realizing he was a victim of a father's monstrous ambition. If you had this evidence, what would you do first? Contact the family council or find Lena? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're ready for the ultimate confrontation. Vittorio D'Angelo, the old king, didn't rule with an iron fist, he ruled with poison and quiet manipulation. He knew his son, Roman, was close to finding the truth about the initiation and Elias's death, but his immediate threat was Lena. She was the living witness, the person who could expose his monstrous plan to the entire family council. Just hours after Lena vanished from the underground arena, believing the worst about Roman, she made a fatal mistake. Desperate and exhausted, she sought out the one person she still believed was good, Jared, her mentor. She found him at an abandoned dockside warehouse he was using as a hideout. When she arrived, she didn't find comfort, she found a trap. Jared wasn't alone. Vittorio D'Angelo's most trusted, silent assassins were waiting. Jared, wounded and scarred, had been playing his own desperate game, trying to use Lena's reappearance to exact vengeance on Roman. But when he realized the old king was moving to silence them all, it was too late. Vittorio's men moved with chilling efficiency. Lena fought. She was fast, fueled by adrenaline and rage, but she was exhausted, and she was outnumbered by men who fought like machines. They disabled her, not with brutality, but with surgical precision, ensuring she was captured and not killed, yet. Vittorio wanted the truth about her 5-year absence before he silenced her permanently. Meanwhile, Roman, armed with the devastating video footage proving his father's betrayal, was moving like a hurricane. He had his loyal security chief, Damon, using every contact and resource to locate Lena. Roman's first act of defiance was immediate and absolute. He didn't confront his father, he cut him off. He used the digital keys he had just recovered to lock Vittorio out of the family's external financial accounts and communication networks. It was a digital coup, stunning the old man and buying Roman precious time. But Roman knew that without Lena, his proof was just a story. He needed her testimony, and he needed her alive. The call came from an anonymous source Roman had used years ago for high-stakes information, a source that only served the D'Angelo patriarch. Vittorio has her, the voice whispered, raw and urgent. She's at the old fortress, under the church in Little Italy. He's going to question her, then make her disappear. You have hours, Roman. He's going to use her disappearance as final proof of your incompetence. The fortress was an underground catacomb built by the D'Angelo family generations ago, a secure, inescapable vault where the family handled its darkest secrets. It was guarded by men whose loyalty ran deeper than blood. Roman didn't hesitate. This wasn't about the family crown or power anymore. This was about correcting a monstrous wrong, clearing his name, and saving the only person who understood the scope of the lies he had lived under. For the first time, Roman D'Angelo was acting not out of calculated ambition, but out of pure, righteous fury. He gathered his rescue team, Damon, and 2 other men Roman knew had suffered under his father's cold regime. He left behind the expensive suits and the arrogance, equipping himself like a soldier. We go in fast, we go in quiet, and we bring her out alive, Roman ordered, his voice low and hard. If anyone stands in the way, they fall. This is the first time I've ever disobeyed my father. And it will be the last time I let him dictate my life. The rescue mission was a dangerous dive into the family's deepest, darkest secret. The fortress entrance was hidden behind a crypt in the basement of an ornate, old Italian church. Roman and his team moved through the cold, damp stone tunnels, every step an act of pure defiance. They disabled the perimeter guards with brutal, quiet efficiency. Roman led the charge, his movements fueled by adrenaline and the horrifying image of his own drugged face watching Elias burn. They finally reached the main chamber, a wide, high-ceilinged room deep beneath the city. And there she was. Lena was chained to a heavy stone pillar in the center of the room. She was bruised, exhausted, but her eyes, when they met Roman's, were still fiercely defiant, though tinged with fresh, blinding hate. She still believed he was the architect of her destruction. And facing her, sitting regally on a temporary throne, was Vittorio D'Angelo. Roman's father looked old, cold, and utterly terrifying. His face held no emotion, only the calculating stillness of a man who viewed human life as expendable chess pieces. "I knew you would come, son," Vittorio said, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. He didn't sound surprised, only disappointed. "You should have let the woman go. Now you've made her an accessory to your failure." Roman stepped into the light, Damon and the team spreading out behind him. "Release her, father," Roman commanded, his voice shaking with the effort of control. "The coup is over. Nico is detained. Salazar is retreating. And I have the truth about the initiation." Vittorio laughed, a dry, brittle sound that offered no humor. "The truth? The truth is what I choose it to be, Roman. I made you the king by making you believe you were a killer. I built your strength on that guilt. And you were doing so well until this low-life fighter came back to confuse you." He gestured to Lena with disdain. "She is a witness to Elias's survival, and she is a constant reminder of your weakness. She died here tonight. And you will watch it, just like you watched Elias burn." Lena pulled against the chains, her eyes blazing at Roman. "He doesn't get to kill me, Roman. I get to kill him. You were there. You stood by. You're just as guilty." Roman knew he couldn't convince her with words. Not yet. He had to act. "Damon, secure the chamber," Roman ordered. Then, he took the deepest breath of his life and faced his father. "I was there, father." "You made sure of it," Roman said, his voice cracking with the pain of the memory. "But I wasn't a killer. I was a child, drugged, and forced to watch the death of my family. I have the footage. You broke me to make me rule. And tonight, I break you to save the one innocent person you tried to destroy." Vittorio stood up, his face hardening into an expression of murderous rage. "You defy the family, boy? You choose this gutter rat over your inheritance?" This was the moment of Roman's true initiation. He drew a small, heavy pistol from his coat, aimed it at his father's head, and fired, not a bullet, but a smoke bomb. The chamber instantly filled with a thick, disorienting cloud. This was the signal. Roman's men charged, engaging Vittorio's surprised personal guard. Roman ran through the blinding smoke straight toward Lena. He had to reach her before his father did. He moved with a speed and agility born not of training, but of desperation. He reached the pillar, his hands immediately working the complex mechanism of the chains. In the choking darkness, a figure lunged at Roman. It was Vittorio, fueled by decades of absolute power, desperate to stop his son. "You're weak, Roman. You'll never be a king." Vittorio roared, his hands closing around Roman's throat. Roman, choked and fighting for his life, knew this was the ultimate confrontation. He was defying the man who had created him. He landed a desperate, savage blow to his father's ribs, the sound lost in the chaos. He finally snapped the last lock. The chains clattered to the floor. Lena was free, grabbing the fallen weapon of one of the guards. "He killed Elias." Lena screamed, her eyes searching for a target in the blinding smoke. Roman grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "He lied. He drugged me. He made me watch. I have the video, Lena. We have to go." Lena fought his grip, wanting only revenge, but the desperate honesty in his voice, the physical proof of his defiance, reached through her rage. They were the same. They were both victims of the old king. They ran, two broken figures united by a terrible truth, leaving the battleground where Roman had finally defined himself. Roman had defied his father for the first time, not for power, but for love and justice, and he had secured the truth in chains. Sometimes, the most important battles are not fought for power, but for the moral clarity that power tries to suppress. Roman found his true self in the ultimate act of defiance, choosing truth and a broken ally over the crown. If you were Lena, would you believe Roman now, or still hold on to the doubt? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe to see the final chapter of their fight for the truth. The escape from the fortress was messy, loud, and successful only because Vittorio D'Angelo was too stunned by his son's defiance to give a focused pursuit. Roman and Lena burst out of the church crypt and into the cold night air, adrenaline burning away the pain. They didn't go far. Roman knew they couldn't risk his safe houses. He drove them to a remote, empty parking garage high above the city, a place where the vast, silent view of the sleeping metropolis offered a temporary, cold sanctuary. The moment the car stopped, Lena was out, putting the entire width of the garage between them. She stood near the concrete ledge, her hands trembling, the taste of smoke and fear still heavy in her mouth. She was free of the chains, but she was still bound by the lie Jared and Nico had fed her, and the devastating truth Roman claimed. Roman followed, moving slowly, his body aching from the brief, savage fight with his father. He didn't approach her aggressively. He approached her as a broken man seeking forgiveness he might not deserve. "Lena, stop," Roman said, his voice raw. "Look at me. Look at what I just did. I risked my life and everything I own to save you from my own father." Lena spun to face him, her eyes blazing with a mixture of grief and explosive rage. "You want me to look at you, Roman?" she demanded, the sound echoing in the empty space. "I looked at you 5 years ago. I saw the darkness in you the second you mocked me in that restaurant. That darkness is what killed Elias." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a desperate, broken whisper. "You were there. You watched him burn. Jared saw you. Nico confirmed it. You can't tell me that all the evidence of my life, the fear, the running, the pain, is based on a lie you just fabricated to save your own skin." Roman knew this wasn't about convincing her he was innocent, it was about proving he was a victim too. He reached into his coat and pulled out a ruggedized tablet, placing it on the hood of the car. He didn't touch her. He stepped back. "I won't beg you to believe me, Lena. But I will show you the truth that my father spent 5 years burying. The truth that broke me so he could rule." He quickly typed the code, pulled up the secured file labeled Initiation, RD, and played the surveillance footage. The grainy, sickening video of his younger, drugged self, eyes glazed and confused, watching Elias struggle below. The clear audio of his father's cold, triumphant voice, "He needs to see it, we make Roman strong." Lena didn't move toward the screen. She just stood and watched, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Roman's drugged figure being dragged away, a puppet with no will of his own. The sight of the powerful, arrogant man she knew reduced to a helpless boy was shattering. When the video ended, the only sound was the wind whipping across the rooftop. Lena slowly walked to the screen, touching the cold glass where the frozen image of Roman's drugged face remained. She saw the metallic taste, the confusion, the terrible lack of control. She saw the face of a victim, not a killer. The hate that had sustained her for 5 years began to crumble, replaced by a devastating, confusing surge of pity and a shared sense of violation. "He used me to make you a monster," Lena whispered, the realization pulling a wrenching sob from her chest. "My pain was just a tool for his ambition." Roman finally walked to her, his voice low and heavy with the weight of his confession. "I don't remember it, Lena." Not until Damon forced the memory into focus. "My father didn't want me to kill Elias, he wanted me to believe I was capable of it, so I would never have a conscience. He poisoned my memory, and he used your grief to protect his lie." He stepped closer, closing the last few feet of space between them. He didn't try to touch her. He just stood, exposed and vulnerable, for the first time in his life. I have done terrible things, Lena. I have been cold, I have been ruthless, and I have chased power with a sickness I didn't understand. But I swear on Elias's memory, I was not willingly a part of his death. Your suffering was real. Your vengeance was justified. And now, my only path to redemption is to help you crush the man who is responsible for both of our lives being shattered. Lena was torn. The evidence was irrefutable. The way Roman had fought for her in the fortress, the fury in his eyes when he defied his father, it wasn't the act of a guilty man trying to cover a crime, it was the act of a son realizing he had been monstrously betrayed. But 5 years of hate, of grief, of running based on the belief that he was the villain, were not easy to dismiss. The bond that had grown between them during the alliance, the mutual respect for skill, the shared adrenaline of the hunt, was deeply confusing. How could she feel pity, even a strange, desperate reliance, on the man who was supposed to be the source of all her pain? Tears finally streamed down her face, tears of relief that her fiancé's death wasn't caused by a careless whim, and tears of raw agony for the monstrous lie that had stolen her life. I don't know who you are, Roman, Lena choked out, staring up at him, the former arrogance now replaced by a haunted honesty. I don't know who I am without that hate. You shattered my past, and you broke the only life I knew. Roman reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment, before gently cupping her cheek, wiping away a tear with his thumb. It was the first time he had touched her in kindness, and the intimacy of the gesture was startling. Then we build a new one, Roman said, his voice filled with a powerful, desperate promise. We use this truth, Lena. We take down the old king. We get justice for Elias, and then we both walk away free, finally free from the ghosts of my father's lies. He had confessed everything. He had laid his entire life bare, exposing the deepest humiliation and the most painful betrayal. He was begging her to let him prove that the bond they had forged under fire was real, and that the vengeance she craved was now his to deliver, too. Lena looked from his eyes, filled with a raw, undeniable sincerity, to the city spread out beneath them, a city where her past and future were now dangerously intertwined with his. She didn't trust him fully, but she believed him. And she knew that the real enemy was still out there. She slowly nodded, a single, definitive move that signaled the end of the hatred and the beginning of a dangerous, shared path. Sometimes, love and justice don't look like fireworks, they look like two damaged people standing on a cold rooftop, choosing to fight the monstrous lie that defined their lives. What do you think is the biggest challenge now for Roman and Lena, facing Vittorio or facing the confusing feelings growing between them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the final, thrilling chapter. The moment Roman defied his father and rescued Lena from the fortress, a signal was sent across the city, the D'Angelo War had begun. Roman was no longer the designated heir, he was a rogue element. Lena was no longer just a ghost, she was Roman's collaborator and the living proof of the family's deepest secret. Rival Mafia crews, sensing weakness and the chaos of internal conflict, immediately sprang into action. They weren't just hunting Roman, they were hunting Vittorio D'Angelo, the old king, too. The city became a dangerous chessboard, and Roman and Lena were the most wanted pieces. They drove straight out of the city, using back roads and older vehicles Roman had stashed over the years, assets kept secret from his father and Nico. Their refuge was a small, run-down cottage near the Niagara Escarpment, miles from the nearest town. It was remote, simple, and the last place anyone would look for a mafia boss and a former underground fighter. The seclusion didn't bring peace, it amplified the tension. The emotional collision between Roman and Lena was inevitable. They were two highly disciplined, highly volatile people, bound by trauma and confined by necessity. Lena was still processing the horrific realization that her 5 years of pain were due to a monstrous lie, and Roman was wrestling with the shame of his father's betrayal. One night, while Roman was meticulously cleaning and reloading their limited supply of weapons, the quiet broke. "You still move like you're waiting for the punch," Lena said, her voice cutting through the silence. She was sitting across the small room, nursing a steaming mug of tea, her eyes fixed on his movements. Roman paused, sighting down the barrel of a pistol. I move like I know what's coming. You taught me that. No, Lena snapped, standing up. I taught you how to fight bullies. Your father taught you how to live with a lie. That video, it proves you're not a monster, Roman, but it proves you're a puppet. The word landed like a strike. Roman slammed the pistol onto the table. And what are you, Lena? A martyr? You let me believe I was the killer for 5 years because it was easier than fighting the real enemy. You ran instead of exposing the truth. I ran to survive, she shouted back, tears of anger and grief flooding her eyes. Elias died in my arms. I saw his blood mix with the ashes, and then I saw your face, Roman. You were standing right there. What was I supposed to believe? That the drug dealer's son was a victim, too? The confrontation escalated quickly. The distance between them vanished as they moved closer, the anger blurring into something intensely physical. Roman grabbed her shoulders, not to hurt her, but to force her to see him, to stop running from the awful truth they shared. Yes. You were supposed to believe that the men who kill for power have no limits. Roman roared, shaking her gently. We were both broken by the same man. We can only fix it together. Their fight was raw, fueled by years of repressed emotion. They were fighting the ghost of Elias, the ghost of Roman's drugged memory, and the crushing weight of their shattered past. And then, just as quickly, the anger fractured into something unexpected. Exhausted by the rage, the fight dissolved into a desperate, clinging embrace. The shared trauma, the proximity to death, and the intense emotional release created an intimacy that defied all logic. They weren't lovers, they were two survivors grasping at the only stable thing in their crumbling world, each other. After the storm passed, Roman settled back into his work, using Lena's instincts to guide his analysis of the fragmented communication they'd managed to intercept from the city. They used old, disconnected police band scanners and encrypted satellite signals, the digital equivalent of whispering in the dark. Lena, her fighting mind now fully engaged, noticed a crucial detail Roman had missed in the intercepted communication between the Salazar crew and Nico. Salazar isn't just targeting the D'Angelo family structure, Lena pointed out, tracing lines on a makeshift map of the city's industrial zones. They're hitting the supply chains of the Montani and Serafino crews, too. The small ones. The quiet ones who run logistics and betting outside the big networks. Roman leaned over the map, his eyes narrowed. Nico's not just trying to take over the D'Angelo empire. He's trying to unify the crews under one banner. He's not a rival, he's a conqueror. The realization hit them both. Nico's goal wasn't just to replace Roman, it was to become the king of all kings. He planned to use the chaos of the internal D'Angelo war to destabilize every rival organization, clearing the path for a massive, consolidated empire run by him and Salazar. But the most chilling part of the plan involved Lena. They found an encrypted transaction confirmation, a massive payment from a shell company registered in Nico's name to a biotech firm known for high-end digital surveillance and genetic profiling. He's not just using me as a political prop, Lena realized, a cold dread creeping in. He wants to use my skill set. Roman accessed the payment details. The payment was for a special serum, Lena. A neurological agent designed to enhance athletic performance and remove emotional inhibitors. It's what they use to create perfect, controllable fighting machines in illegal black operations. He knew about my talent from the fight circuit, Lena said, her voice trembling. He knows I'm good. He wants to turn the ghost into his ultimate weapon. He wants to use the serum to amplify my skill and then parade me in front of the unified council as the living proof of his new, invincible empire. The initial fear of being hunted was replaced by the terrifying knowledge that Nico intended to turn her into a mindless killer, the final humiliation of Elias's legacy. Roman reached across the map, covering her hand with his own. The touch was no longer aggressive or intimate, it was a bond of absolute necessity. He wants to use the thing that makes you strong to control the entire city, Roman stated grimly. He'll never stop. We can't just defend ourselves, Lena. We have to dismantle the entire organization before he can use you to take the throne. The Mafia war had ignited, forcing the former enemies to confront not only the betrayals of the past but the frightening reality of their present bond. They had traded a life of individual suffering for a mutual fight for survival, the only constant being the fierce, unpredictable nature of their shared mission. This is the ultimate test of loyalty, when your life and your enemy's life depend on the absolute trust between you. Roman and Lena were no longer fighting for revenge, they were fighting for their very identities against a tyrant who sought to erase them. If you were Roman and Lena, what specific piece of evidence, besides the serum payment, would you need to convince the rival families to turn against Nico? Share your strategic thoughts below, and smash that like button if you're ready for the final confrontation. Nico D'Angelo, the traitor, was confident. With Roman and Lena driven into hiding, he launched the final stage of his coup. He organized a grand, televised assembly of the rival syndicate leaders, Montani, Serafino, and others, at a secret location, ready to unveil his vision of a unified empire. The centerpiece of his presentation would be the capture and display of the Ghost. Nico's agents, driven by the huge bounty and the promise of a consolidated empire, finally tracked Roman and Lena to their remote cottage hideout near the escarpment. The attack was swift and overwhelming. Roman and Lena fought back with the savage, coordinated efficiency they had developed, moving like a single, unbreakable unit. They managed to escape the cottage ambush, but in the chaos, Lena was separated and captured by Salazar's best hunters, acting under Nico's explicit command. Nico's plan was chillingly simple: he wouldn't just display Lena, he would break her. He forced her into a brutal, public match at a heavily fortified, temporary arena set up in an abandoned factory near the old city docks. This wasn't just a fight, it was a televised execution meant to showcase the might of the new regime and to break Lena's fighting spirit, preparing her for the paralyzing serum. Roman, alone and heartbroken, watched the live, encrypted feed of the arena on his last working tablet. He saw Lena, bruised and chained to a post before the match, her eyes filled with defiance but also a raw, painful exhaustion. He saw Nico, standing proudly in the VIP box, addressing the syndicate leaders, using Lena's suffering as a prop for his ascension. Roman knew he couldn't save her with strategy or diplomacy. He had to go in alone, embracing the reckless abandon of a man with nothing left to lose but the truth. He didn't call Damon or any remaining loyalists, he knew the risk was too high. He drove his final clean car back into the heart of the city, armed with only his pistol and the single piece of evidence that could destroy Nico, the initiation footage stored on a hardened drive. The factory complex was a fortress, crawling with the unified security forces of Salazar and Nico's newly acquired loyalists. Roman didn't try to sneak in. He drove the car straight through the main warehouse gate, the screech of metal and the crash of the impact serving as his battle cry. The Mafia war had found its climax. Roman emerged from the wreck, firing his pistol into the high rafters, the shots echoing like thunder. He moved through the armed guards with a cold, focused brutality, fueled by the image of Lena's face on the screen. He wasn't the arrogant boss now, he was a man possessed by love and desperate justice. He fought his way through the administrative tunnels, moving toward the sound of the roaring crowd and the metallic clang of the ring bell. He moved past astonished syndicate members who scattered at the sight of the supposedly defeated Roman D'Angelo, now a vengeful ghost. Meanwhile, in the makeshift arena, the match was underway. Lena was facing her biggest challenge yet, a hulking, terrifying fighter known only as the Butcher, a man whose reputation was built on leaving opponents permanently crippled. The Butcher was fueled by the promise of becoming Nico's premier enforcer. Lena was running on empty, her body battered from the capture and the ambush. The Butcher was relentless, using his weight and brute force to systematically wear her down, trying to break her spirit before her bones. The crowd was a mix of syndicate members cheering for the new regime and horrified onlookers. Nico D'Angelo watched from his VIP box, a cruel smirk on his face, waiting for Lena to fall so he could administer the serum. Lena took a devastating hit to her ribs, doubling her over. She dropped to one knee, the sound of the crowd blurring. She tasted blood, and the dark urge to simply give up was overwhelming. He's going to win. He's going to turn me into a machine. But just as the butcher lumbered in for the final, crippling blow, a new sound cut through the roar of the arena, the distinct, loud, rapid crack of gunfire from the access tunnels. "Leave her alone." Roman D'Angelo burst into the arena, covered in sweat and grime, fighting his way through the last line of guards with the ferocity of a caged animal. He didn't look at Nico, his eyes were locked entirely on Lena. Lena saw him, not the cold boss, but the desperate, defiant man who had risked everything to choose her. The sight of him, battling against impossible odds, brought a sudden, blinding clarity. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by an incandescent rage, not for Roman, but for the life they were fighting to protect. The butcher, distracted by the sudden, unprecedented invasion, turned toward the threat. That was all Lena needed. She used the butcher's momentary distraction to explode back to her feet. She moved like pure lightning, sidestepping his clumsy turn. She aimed, not for the head, but for the places she knew would end the fight instantly. She drove a series of devastating, calculated kicks, to the thigh, the knee, and finally, a savage, snapping strike that shattered the butcher's ankle. The massive man roared in pain and collapsed, the sound of his falling body shaking the ring. Lena stood over him, breathing hard, her body aching, but her spirit whole. She had won. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the defeated butcher. She looked through the chaos of the gunfire, past the scrambling syndicate members, straight at Roman. Roman had dropped the pistol, his own fight finished. He ran toward the ring, climbing over the ropes. They met in the center of the ring, in the blood and the sweat and the glory of their victory. For the first time since that fatal knockout, Roman reached out and took her hand. Not in battle, not in desperation, but in a bond forged in the fires of their shattered past. They were a single force now, the king and the ghost, standing together against the chaos they had created. Nico D'Angelo, watching from his VIP box, looked down at the triumphant pair, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. His entire coup, his future, was collapsing because of their unbroken, impossible bond. "Kill them both." Nico screamed into the microphone, his voice echoing over the silent, stunned arena. But the syndicate leaders, seeing the proof of Roman's defiance and Lena's strength, hesitated. They saw a true, powerful alliance, and a broken, hysterical traitor. Roman didn't flinch at Nico's threat. He raised his free hand, holding up the hardened drive containing the footage of the initiation. "Nico is not the king," Roman roared, his voice cutting through the panic. "He's a liar, and a puppet of my father. The D'Angelo family will not be ruled by betrayal. The war ends now." The Mafia war had ignited, but standing in the center of the battlefield, Lena and Roman had achieved their victory. They had fought their way back to each other, securing their truth in a bloody, emotional battle. The final fight had secured their alliance, and finally, their freedom. The ending of this journey isn't just about a victory, it's about two souls finding each other in the darkest of places. If you were in that crowd, who would you follow, the defeated, screaming Nico, or the victorious, defiant Roman and Lena? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to witness the final, beautiful conclusion to their story. The final confrontation at the arena had shattered Nico's coup, but it had left Roman and Lena with one terrifying loose end: Vittorio D'Angelo, the old king. The father who had poisoned his son's memory and orchestrated the ultimate betrayal was still alive, fleeing the chaos of the arena with his most hardened personal guard. Roman knew this war wouldn't end until Vittorio was silenced forever. He was the root of the lie, the architect of both his and Lena's suffering. Roman and Lena, moving with the cold synchronization of two veterans, chased Vittorio back to his most secure, final retreat, a hidden, armored vault beneath his original family estate. They moved as a true partnership, Lena using her agility and knowledge of the terrain to draw out the guards, and Roman using his strategic brilliance to disable the security systems. They cornered Vittorio in the opulent, wood-paneled study, the very room where Roman had been groomed for a throne built on lies. Vittorio, armed and furious, looked at his son not with love but with chilling contempt. You chose her, Roman, Vittorio spat, raising his weapon. You chose a gutter rat over the name of D'Angelo. You are weak. Roman stood his ground, Lena a silent, deadly figure positioned strategically behind him. I chose the truth, father, Roman said, his voice steel. And I choose the life you tried to steal from both of us. The D'Angelo reign ends tonight. And it ends with the truth about Elias. Vittorio fired first, his shot missing Roman by inches. As the heavy crack of the gunshot ripped through the silence, Lena darted forward, engaging Vittorio's guard. Roman didn't hesitate. He returned fire, his aim steady, driven by the absolute certainty that he was not killing his father, but killing the poison that had defined his life and Lena's pain. The fight was over instantly. Vittorio D'Angelo, the old king, fell, the D'Angelo reign ending with a terrible, definitive silence. The exhaustion of the 5-year fight finally left Lena. She was free. The source of her suffering was gone, thanks to the man she had almost killed herself. With the D'Angelo chaos neutralized, Roman and Lena had time to sort through the final pieces of evidence. Roman found a hidden, locked diary belonging to his father, which detailed the entire plot. But it revealed one last, devastating truth. Lena had insisted on looking at the evidence against her mentor, Jared, the man who had returned from the dead to accuse Roman. She couldn't reconcile the scarred mentor with the relentless cruelty of the lie he told. In Vittorio's diary, they found the full record of the coup. It confirmed that Jared had indeed survived the fire, but he hadn't been hiding in exile. He had been working with Nico all along. Jared hadn't returned to warn Lena, he had returned to manipulate her. He had seen the opportunity to use Elias's death and Lena's vengeance as the final, perfect leverage to help Nico overthrow Roman. Jared hated the D'Angelo family so deeply that he was willing to sacrifice Lena's emotional stability to see Roman fall. The tears, the scars, the whole performance, it was all a calculated, final betrayal. Lena stared at the diary entry, her last hero collapsing into dust. She was now truly alone in her history. The man who taught her how to fight had used her as a weapon against the man who had been forced to love her. Roman placed the diary gently on the table next to her. Jared and Nico were planning to meet tomorrow. Jared is still active, still believing he's part of the new empire. I have enough evidence here to expose him to the remaining council members, but that won't give you justice. Roman then handed Lena a smaller, unmarked burner phone and a set of keys. He's hiding at an old warehouse by the port. He took everything from you, Lena, your love, your peace, and your truth. You have the right to end this cycle. Go. Do what you need to do. He gave her the ultimate freedom, the chance to claim the final vengeance. Lena held the phone and the keys, feeling the cold weight of the decision. Vengeance was easy, it was familiar. She could kill Jared, and it would be the clean, final strike she had been dreaming of for 5 years. She looked at the phone, then at Roman. He didn't try to influence her, he simply waited, allowing her the dignity of her own choice. She looked down at the keys, then back at the diary, at the endless cycle of hatred and betrayal that had defined the D'Angelo world. She thought of Elias, who had died trying to protect peace, not perpetuate violence. Lena slowly lowered the phone and the keys. She looked at Roman, and a soft, genuine smile touched her lips, the first true, peaceful smile he had ever seen. No more blood, Roman, she said, her voice clear and decisive. No more ghosts. I'm done being their weapon. Jared will face the law. We are done with the underground. She had chosen rebirth over revenge. The ensuing weeks were chaotic but decisive. Roman used the evidence of his father's crimes and Nico's comprehensive treachery to expose the truth to the remaining syndicate leaders. He didn't ask for the crown, he offered a clean break. He dismantled the D'Angelo empire, not by violence, but by dissolving the family's illegal assets, transferring control of all legitimate businesses to a new, transparent holding company, and cooperating fully with authorities regarding Nico and Jared. Roman kept his word. He rebuilt the network cleanly, using his unparalleled strategic mind and financial prowess to convert the Mafia machine into a legitimate, ethical, and thriving corporate enterprise. He had shed the title of king for the role of CEO. And Lena? She wasn't just a survivor. She was his equal partner. She served as the head of security and internal affairs for the new organization. Her keen instincts and profound knowledge of the dangers in their former world made her irreplaceable. She was no longer the ghost, she was the foundation. Roman finally found his true strength, not in his capacity for cruelty, but in his ability to protect and defend. And Lena finally found her peace, not by running, but by standing beside the man who had become her shield and her partner in building something clean. They stood together, overlooking the city, not as two scarred fighters, but as two architects of a new, legitimate future. The pain remained, but the hope was greater. Love had not won by eliminating the past, but by choosing to stop the violence and embrace a future built on shared truth and mutual respect. This is the ultimate lesson: true strength isn't found in vengeance, but in the courage to end the cycle of hatred and choose to build something beautiful with the person who understands your scars the most. If you were Lena, what would be the first charity or community center you would open to help other survivors? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button and share this story of justice and rebirth with your friends. Lena and Roman found their peace not by finding comfort, but by choosing courage. They walked away from the endless, bloody cycle of revenge. They had the power, the money, and the justification to rule the city with an iron fist, but they chose to use their strength to build instead of destroy. Roman shed the cold skin of the king, transforming his vast network into a legitimate empire built on integrity, not intimidation. And Lena, the ghost who had haunted the city's shadows, finally stepped into the light. She became the fierce, moral compass of their new world, ensuring that no one else would suffer the lies and betrayals that defined her past. They stood together, two scarred figures who had every reason to hate the world, but instead chose to heal it. They were partners, equals, bound by a shared trauma that ultimately proved stronger than any throne. The story of Lena and Roman is proof that even when your entire foundation has been shattered by betrayal, you can still choose to rebuild, brick by ethical brick, a life where justice wins, love is earned, and hope shines brightest. The ghost and the king didn't just survive the war, they ended it. And their story, finally, begins now. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.